on both shoulders. With that same thank you. Good job.
I'm going to stop right here because this is one of the you can take throughout the site. Can everyone back there hear me all right? Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Good? Awesome. Okay, so I'm stopping us here. The first stop of our tour because this is an interesting part of the site. This is the oldest known tree on the site. It is a live oak and it's thought to be about 150 years old. So pretty cool. Now for some site history. The site got its start around 1978 when two teenage boys, two young men, Paul Barron and Eddie Buffkin, were walking down a ravine, a sort of creek bed, and they saw a bone weathering out of the ravine wall. At first they thought it was a human skull just because it was sort of rounded and they could tell it was a bone, but they dug part of it up and saw that it was actually a long bone. They saw some other shapes that might be bones, these large bones just in the ground, and so they went to the paleontologist at the Strecker Museum. Now it's known as the Mayborn Museum on Baylor campus, and Dr. Lintz there identified it as the leg bone of a Columbian mammoth. Now, a Columbian mammoth is not the same as a woolly mammoth. They're larger cousins. They live farther south than woolies did. Woolies lived in like the northern part of Canada and Alaska, whereas Columbian mammoths lived farther south. Their range overlapped a little bit, but they lived as far south as Costa Rica, which woolly mammoths did not. And so, when Dr. Lintz heard that there might be more bones in there, you don't really find mammoth bones in such large concentrations. So they sent a volunteer group of excavators to dig it up, and they uncovered five out of the first 16 mammoths. So it would be known as the only known Columbian mammoth nursery herd site known in the world. Now, does anyone have any idea what a nursery herd might be?
A nursery herd?
Young mothers?
You got it. So, in elephants today and in their extinct relatives, the mammoths, a nursery herd is a herd of animals that is comprised of female elephants or mammoths and their young. And so we've found such sites for woolly mammoths
Okay,
before,
that's a nursery herd.
but never for Columbian mammoths except for here at this site. So this site is unique in the world in that respect. They found the first. They found the first 5 mammoths here between 1979 and 1983 in the first sort of phase of excavation. In 1984, they found more until they found a total of 16, and they left them there on site for a while. But they couldn't leave them there indefinitely because the rain would sort of make them degrade over time, and they eventually had to be dug up and have since been stored in the Mayborn Museum in collections for safekeeping, where they are to this day.
Mayborn Museum.
Good so
I've
far?
been there
Any
since we were little.
questions?
Okay. That was
Oh,
cool.
they're named after Christopher Columbus because they only appear
Wait, what?
in
I need to do scores today?
North and Central America.
Were they intact, all the bones, or fractured?
No, some skeletons were more complete than others, and that's why we say there was at least 16 mammoths in the original nursery herd. It could have been more, it could have been less, but we think it was at least 16.
This is so cool.
Yeah, having a good time?
Yep. How about you?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot. It's kind of cool that this is so close to where we
All right,
live.
I'd like to stop here real quick. So, as I said, there was a first phase of excavation that ended shortly after 1984 when they excavated the rest of the mammoths, and for a while it was just that. But then they started in 1991 to take sediment from nearby to cover up the spaces left by the original excavation, and accidentally stumbled upon more bones. And those are the ones you'll see today. And so between 1991 and around 2006, around 2006, yes, they excavated what are five additional mammoths, as well as a camel, unidentified rib bones, probably from an even-toed mammal, sort of like a pronghorn, more or less in size. We're not sure what animal that was, though. and a baby saber-toothed cat, a baby saber cat's tooth, as well as
Baby saber-toothed tiger.
giant land tortoise shell fragments. And so it's there just for a reference. And then the total
shoulders
height
of
of the land
Colombian
pool is about
mammoth.
as tall as the largest giant ground sloths could stand. So
Dang.
that's just kind of there for reference. This bridge is actually built above the ravine where the first phase of excavation happened. Happened right here, and those sort of loose rocks you see there, the sort of loose like small boulders, are actually infill used to, of course, fill back in the space left by the first phase of excavation, where the nursery herd was excavated from. As you can see, it's still an active waterway. There's some water down there. It does kind of collect water whenever it rains. So like recently, like in recent days, and yeah, it's because it's still an active waterway. That's why they had to move the original 16 and keep them in storage. I have also seen an opossum down there, so that's another fun fact.
Nice.
Juvenile over here. In the middle of that. Huh?
So here we are inside the fish shelter, and the first thing you might notice when you come in, besides the bones themselves, are this mural right here. This is a mural based on the proportions of one of the mammoths here. It was added after the lighting fixture above it was put in place, so I'm not 100% sure if it is like completely to scale, but it's supposed to be to scale just based on the measurements of Mammoth Q. Now Mammoth Q, and yes, you can take pictures of both of it. Mammoth Q here is the only male mammoth at our site, and he's got some interesting things to tell us just through his skeleton. So he's very well articulated in that, which means that his bones are more or less in a lifelike position, which means he probably died suddenly from some kind of natural cause. Additionally, if everyone looks at his rib right there, you can kind of see a sort of almost baseball-sized bulge right there. That is actually a broken rib. And we think that it was caused by Mammoth Q fighting another male mammoth, and he got him in the ribs. And that rib was not only broken, but was infected and showed signs of healing, which means that that's not what killed him. You might also notice that the lower half of Mammoth Q's legs are missing. A lot of times the skeleton of a fossil, like the skeleton of a fossilized animal, is incomplete. But in this particular case, we think it was due to scavenging. Just because there are canid bite marks, probably from a dire wolf or coyote, on the back of his kneecap right there, right next to his femur, his right femur. So that's Mammoth Q, and right in front of Mammoth Q's tusks are actually a couple of piles of bones from baby mammoths. And so this is kind of strange because you don't really see adult male elephants in the present day interacting with baby elephants, and we think the social dynamic was similar with mammoths. So what we're thinking happened was that Mammoth Q was dead and possibly buried here, and then these baby mammoths washed in and landed in front of his tusks. I say washed in because we think water was somehow involved in what happened here. What's interesting about this site is that through a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL, they dated the two sort of layers of the site, because the site is divided into two sort of temporal layers. If everyone looks at that wall down there, they can kind of see the sort of faint bands near the bottom. The bottom one, the older one, is easier to see than the top one. Those are called event lines, and we think they were caused by some kind of natural event that moved a lot of sediment and deposited it all within a short period of time. So this site, we think, even as far back as when these lines were dated to, the bottom one being dated to around 65,000 years old, and the top one to around 51,000 years old. We think that at that time, the bosky and Brazos rivers were already here. And they might have even connected to form a confluence, meaning that this site would have been pretty humid and abundant year-round. So, as a result, we think the reason all these animals were buried here 50,000 years apart had something to do with seasonal flooding. However, we don't think that this flooding is what killed them because of the evidence of scavengers. There are actually drill holes from dermestid beetles, which are a type of beetle that only eats dry flesh. And so that indicates that these animals were lying out for an extended period of time before being buried. So what we think happened was there were drought conditions that led to malnutrition and death, followed by flooding that buried these these two groups of animals. Also, an important piece of information to note is that this bottom layer with the camel, yes, we do have a camel, is thought to be of the same time period as the nursery herd. And so, as well as Mammoth Q and the babies in the 51,000 year layer, farther down in the 65,000 year layer, we have Mammoth S, which, as you can see, is more jumbled than Mammoth Q. And we also don't know if it was a male or female. And part of the reason why is because if you look at its leg bone right there, it's not fully fused. What we call the growth plates are not fully fused to the sort of ball joint part of the bone, meaning that Mammoth S was a subadult. So Mammoth S was a teenage mammoth. I mentioned we have a camel as well. Now, people are often surprised to find out that we have camels here in North America, but it's what actually happened was that camels first evolved in North America, and then because it was in the Ice Age, it was during the Ice Age for Pleistocene, between 2.5 million and 11,000 years ago. This is the Pleistocene epoch, the period during which the Ice Age occurred. So sea levels were lower, and as a result, the Bering Land Bridge was something that connected North America to Eurasia, the sort of combined supercontinent of Europe and Asia. And as a result, animals were able to cross across. They were able to cross across from Eurasia to and from North America, and that's how camels got into Asia and Africa, and why they exist there today. They also migrated farther south, and have since become extinct everywhere except for the Andes, where their cousins, the alpacas, the llamas and alpacas. So you can think of llamas and alpacas as sort of small fuzzy camels, essentially. And that's why this species of camel, the Western camel, is actually more closely related to llamas or alpacas than to the camels around today. This camel also has evidence of scavenging in the form of sort of bite marks and the beetle drill holes, as well as her spine facing the total opposite direction of what it should be facing. It's facing the opposite direction of the sort of pelvic girdle. The fact that we have a camel here is an important piece of information because it tells us more about the environment. So camels are what we call browsers, which means that they eat a diet of, consisting more of leaves and twigs and fruits, those kind of things, more than mammoths. Mammoths are grazers, which means they eat almost everything they eat is grass. They'll eat some leaves here and there, but most of their diet is grass. And they ate a lot of grass. They ate between 400 and 700 pounds of grass every day, it's estimated, and it's thought that they could spend up to 20 hours a day eating grass. So that's a lot of grass. And as a result, the fact that we have mammoths and a camel here tells us a lot about the sort of environment of the site at the time. Moving along this way, we also have Mammoth W. Mammoth W is a female mammoth, so she's a little bit smaller than Mammoth Q, but she was about the same age, even though it's thought she lived about 15,000 years before, because even though it looks like she's on the same level as Mammoth Q, the site is kind of on an incline. And so up here, where she is, would have correlated level-wise with this lower layer. And so the first thing you might notice about Mammoth W is her teeth. Does anyone see how many teeth she has? Any guesses?
4.
Yep, you got it. Mammoths only have 4 teeth at any one time. And this is because they needed a large flat surface with lots of grooves for grinding grass all day. Grass is a tough plant to chew all day. And so they'd grind their teeth together they'd grind their teeth together for upwards of around 20 hours a day to chew grass. And that would wear down their teeth eventually. So mammoths had a special way of replacing their teeth. You know how we only have 2 sets of teeth, and whenever we lose one, there's like a gap for some time before it's replaced? With mammoths, they had 5 or 6 sets of teeth. So imagine the tooth could be about the size of a silver dollar, and the largest ones could reach the size of about a size of a shoe dollar. And based on that, we can approximate how old the animal was at time of death. So that tells us that Mammoth W here was around 40 or 50 when she died. We also have the replica of the saber-toothed cat tooth right there. This is one of only 2 replicas here in the dig shelter, and we have the real thing in collections. We have a replica in its place so that way whenever we do programs down there, we can pick it up and sort of show its size comparison to our hand whenever we pick it up. But it looks kind of small, doesn't it? Does anyone have any ideas why this saber-toothed cat's tooth is so small? Anyone?
Because you're juvenile?
You got it. So this is actually a baby tooth from a saber-toothed cat. And that's another important piece of information to try to figure out what happened. For trying to figure out what happened here, because that means that this area was abundant enough that not only were there large herbivores and carnivores living here, but that even carnivores were raising their young here. And so that helps us get an even better picture of the. This is the skull of Mammoth J, or a replica. It was found nowhere near here. This was actually found in the original nursery herd excavation, and I think it was placed here for visitors to the site like y'all to check it out and see it for yourselves. And so the first thing you might notice about Mammoth J is that one of her tusks is a lot shorter than the other. And that brings me to the last part of my tour. So, and no one has to share if they don't want to. Who here has ever broken a bone? Are you sure? just making sure. They probably ate a lot just because
How much did a saber-toothed
predators
tiger
tend to
eat?
eat a lot, because the farther out the food chain you go, the less energy is inside what you eat. So they probably ate a lot. That being said, saber-toothed cats actually didn't really hunt mammoths because mammoths are just too big. If they ever attacked a mammoth, it would probably be a really old mammoth, an injured mammoth, or a mammoth that was all by itself. Or a baby, exactly.
What was the story of the Ice Age book? We just realized the bones of the saber-toothed cat, that's what Diego would look like.
Yeah, Diego was supposed to be a Smilodon, which was a genus of saber-toothed cat. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's something I also meant to mention that I haven't mentioned. Here in Texas, at the time that we had mammoths, we had 2 species of saber-toothed cats, because there were multiple species. We had the famous Smilodon species, what Diego from Ice Age was. And we also had a smaller species with shorter teeth called Homotherium. Its name literally means same beast, just because of how similar it was to Smilodon. And we don't know what species that one was, because that was a milk tooth, so like this baby tooth of a saber-toothed cat, and we can't tell what the species is unless it's like an adult tooth. So, yes.
Bunch of bones right there. Cool, huh?
This was when what's his name was alive. Dude, we really only put here.
Recording. Okay. You were telling us when we were out here earlier, he said, what now?
Orange tape up there?
Is as high as an adult sloth, as an adult mammoth would be. That's the height of an adult mammoth.
And you're 6 foot tall?
6'1".
The light pole is about the height of an adult sloth.
So sloths were huge.
Dives up to that tape right there.
So when you look at like the Ice Age cartoon, that was just artistic license making Sid so small.
Yeah, what was his name?
Sid?
Sid.
It's Sid.
Sid the sloth.
He actually should have been taller
Giant
than
sloths
the
are
mammoth.
that tall.
Pretty cool.
Jeez Louise.